Welcome to our second official PA-CAT webinar. We ran a webinar back in, I guess it was late November when we did our last one, when we were just launching our PA-CAT website, just getting things really geared up for the official launch. We decided that we wanted to do a series of webinars led by Scott Massey and Johnna Yealy, just to really keep everybody in the loop, keep everybody updated on the program. And just really keep that information out to the community. So we appreciate Scott and John's time, and I'll be introducing them more formally as we go. So anyway, I did want to say that the launch of the PA-CAT as an admissions tool, it really is a culmination of years of work. We've been having conversations with PA program directors for years about the idea of an admissions exam. Folks really felt that the GRE really wasn't good enough, and nothing against the GRE. It's just that folks felt it wasn't properly targeted. It really didn't correlate well. And for quite some time, we've had folks say, we really think we could benefit from having an admissions exam. So long story short, we got a lot of programs involved with us to help us field test. Scott and Johnna were our principal investigators. They are the ones that really put together the research protocol. Both Scott and Johnna have a lot of research experience under their belts, so we were really pleased and fortunate to have them with us. And then what really kind of took us by surprise was how many programs got involved. We had probably 42 programs involved. A few of the programs involved tested twice, across cohorts. And so it was really just a tremendous level of support. We ended up having 48 field test administrations of the PA-CAT, and that was just remarkable from our perspective. And that involved over 2,000 incoming students. So really, we had a chance to really put the exam out there, to really iterate, make adjustments. And one of the benefits of working with the PA community is that the PA programs don't all have the same academic calendar. So we could test with some incoming May cohorts, June cohorts, July cohorts, and then adjust, and then we may have a set of August cohorts coming in. So it really helped us to sort of speed up the development cycle in a way that might not have been possible were we working on a program like this in pharmacy, for example, where most of the schools were on the same academic calendar. So that all really was just a favorable circumstance. And then having so many program directors and folks in admissions willing to say, we'll carve out some time for this exam for 3 hours for our incoming students was really appreciated. Students may not have loved it, but they did their part. And so we really, are grateful for all of that. Shortly, I'll be introducing Scott and Johnna. They'll be presenting today. Just a brief word about Exam Master. Most of you probably know us because we've been working with you for a long time. We first got involved with the PA community way back in 2004 when we had Dr. Aftab Hassan from Harlem Hospital PA program reach out to us and say, hey, I'm trying to help my students with this PANCE prep, but they don't really have anything to use. We're using this medical school stuff. Can you work with us to develop something for the PANCE? And that's really what got us started. So we initially developed a resource over about 18 months, and then we really got better acquainted with the PA community and started working with a lot of programs in a lot of different ways. And so we do count on a lot of PA programs as clients, and we certainly are grateful for that. And that has really helped us in terms of this program. So we've been busy the last few years, obviously, but we think that it's, the hard work is paying off because we've had a lot of excitement. We opened up registration for the PA-CAT today, as a matter of fact, and we can talk about that. And we've actually have had candidates actually register for the exam, so that's pretty amazing. So with that, I'm going to move over to the slide deck. Hopefully everybody can see that on your screen. But before I do that, I just want to make sure, can everyone hear me okay? And I'll assume you may all be on mute, so let's see if you can hear me. But all right, we'll just move forward. So what you see here is our second webinar. Moving forward to the next slide, this is an overview of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to brief history of the PA-CAT, how we got here, We're going to talk about what the PA-CAT is, essentially a science-based assessment. We'll be talking about the use of the PA-CAT for admissions. We'll be talking about the particulars of registration, scheduling, and testing, because folks are going to want to know, their students or applicants are going to want to know. Reporting the scores, that's really the bottom line here is, the outcomes reporting, so that PA program leadership can use that information as part of their admissions selection process. We'll talk a little bit about special accommodations and fee waivers, available resources, research findings. As Scott and Johnna will point out, the research leading up to the launch of the PA-CAT is really just the beginning, because there will be a lot of opportunity to continue that work going forward, because folks are going to want to test the efficacy of the exam in real world circumstances and over time. So the research is really probably something that will be continuous throughout the life of this, as far as we can see. And then we'll talk just briefly about our pre-matriculation program, which is designed to help incoming PA students kind of freshen up before they start the didactic. And then if you have any questions, Scott and Johnna would be more than happy to answer what we can, given the time. So just briefly, most of you probably know Scott and Johnna. Just briefly, Scott has recently been the program director, now the associate program director at Central Michigan University. He's had leadership positions at several PA programs. He's also has done a lot of research, a lot of publishing. He's been involved with PAEA. He has been, really a lifelong supporter and contributor to the PA educational community. Likewise, Johnna Yealy has also been involved in leadership positions at a number of PA programs. She's also done a fair amount of research. She completed her PhD last year or the year before, looking at pre-admission, admission variables and how they correlate to student performance as they move through the curriculum. She also works in emergency medicine. She's also a major in the Army. So she's active and busy and really contributes to the community as well. She's also the founding director at a newer PA program at the University of Tampa. So Johnna and Scott are both busy folks, very involved, and they are very dedicated to the success of the community and the students that that they interact with. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Scott. And Scott, if you want to take things away.
Thanks, Matt.
Yep.
So talk a little bit about the history of the PA-CAT in terms of some of the admission challenges that all of us have faced. One is, are the students coming in, are they ready? Are they able to achieve the preparedness that we really need them to? And looking at admissions variables like GPA, science GPA, as well as prior course history. These have been inconsistent at best. Many of us dissatisfied with the GRE, running, again, just looking at correlation, it's been mixed in terms of some of the existing literature. But I think one of the biggest challenges, at least for me over the years, has been we all enjoy, it's a good problem to have, a large pool of candidates. So at some point, at some level, you have to say to yourself, there's similarly qualified candidates. Is there a way of further discriminating when you get to the point where you have to say, okay, this individual might be more suitable for an interview versus another? So these are just a few key things. Next slide, Matt. So let me walk you through a brief history of the research phase. Just by the way, the PA-CAT research protocol is actually online. It's on ResearchGate if you're interested in reading it. It's gotten about 1,000 views. But looking back to the beginning of the field testing phase, actually CMU was the first program to test in May of 2018. So field testing began with only students during the first week of their program. Later on, it expanded to others, but I'll get to that in a second. Over the last 18 to 24 months, there's been multiple iterations of the exam, starting with version 1.0 and then 1.1, 1.2, etc. So it was continuously tested, updated, based upon the psychometrics as it evolved. And as Matt said, there's been a fair number of pilot administrations. I think that's one of the things that I find so gratifying about this project is the widespread willingness of the PA community to participate. And like anything else, when you look at longitudinal data collection, you're comparing student performance at key points in the curriculum. Please keep in mind that this was a research protocol that was approved by an IRB. We could only actually analyze the data from students who were freshly matriculated. We could not review the data and longitudinally follow candidates who had not yet been admitted or students who are applying to programs. So we're looking at that population base. So it was ongoing, and we're now to the point where we're going to reveal didactic and ePACRAT comparisons of this exam. In a few months, the opportunity will be there to review the exam results versus clinical outcomes, EORs, PACRAT 2, as well as PANS. Okay, next slide, Matt.
Alrighty, I think this is where I'm picking up.
Yeah, John.
A little
Thanks.
bit, yeah, a little bit about the PACRAT. So we've gone through a few versions or iterations of the exam. Each time that we change it, we do it because of test item analysis to improve the exam. But we've worked with several psychometricians to make sure that we haven't violated any principles that would alter the exam so much that we couldn't continue our statistical analysis. It's a 240 item exam, and the students get 4 hours to take it. Of course, when we had our initial advisory committee and we looked at the research in terms of what do programs use or require for prerequisites, anatomy and physiology, as you all know, are the two that almost universally are required by PA programs. So the exam is heavily weighted in those areas. But there were, I think maybe we started out with 14 and we've cut it back a little bit since then as we've continued to refine on the science that's on the exam. All the questions are written at a college level, and they're mapped to blooms, and all of that blueprint and mapping can be seen on the website where we talk a little more about the exam. You can go to the next slide. So those subjects are covered, as I said, you see anatomy and physiology are most heavily weighted, meaning they have the higher percentage on the exam. Then you see the rest there as you go down. And this correlates pretty nicely to the percentages in terms of what PA programs are requiring for prerequisites. It was interesting because my faculty are considering now exam and adding it to our admissions, and one of them was curious about how we would use it if we considered a certain prerequisite more important that was less heavily weighted. And my answer to them is we decide how we use the exam. We decide how we use the reports. So we'll still get a sub-score report on that particular prerequisite that we can look at just because it's not the most heavily weighted item. Next slide.
Okay. So in looking at the admissions overview, just a couple of key points that I wanted to share with you is at this point in time, some programs have expressed interest in adopting. So we know there's some adopters for 2020. Some are electing to recommend. So taking a little bit more of a reflective approach on looking at how the exam will fit into your admissions profile as well. Many programs, I think there's over 100 programs that have a business relationship with Exam Master. There's absolutely no need to have an arrangement with Exam Master to begin using the PA-CAT. You just simply state to your prospective students that you require it as an admissions tool. And in regards to it, websites, we do have a couple of current live websites that we wanted to share with you. One is actually at Central Michigan, my institution. And you can see that the language that we elected to put on there simply was that all applicants to CMU's PA program are required to take the exam. And we don't in there say anything about exactly how it's going to be used. Like we don't say that we're using a certain number of points, and I'll talk about that a little bit in a few minutes, but We also link back to the website for further information. And then there's one for Pfeiffer University, which we can also show briefly as well. So Pfeiffer also said the same thing, and a little more information, I think, than ours. They describe the exam. They just state that it will be required by their students during the admissions phase, and they refer back to the website. So the way in which you advertise it or state it is up to you, but really it's about just stating the same as you put for GRE, that this is a requirement for it applying to your program. Go on to the next slide, please. I think that's yours, Johnna.
It is. So in terms of utilizing the PA-CAT and kind of how do you move forward if you choose that or decide that this is something that you want to do, you really have to obviously know what your own institution requires in terms of making admissions changes, admission requirement changes. I've been at multiple types of institutions and some where this is highly regulated, which is the kind of institution I am at now, versus others where it was a program level decision. But if you are one of those institutions that require multiple approvals, then obviously it's something that you need to get started on soon. One thing that we've heard from some institutions is that they are required to use the GRE by their graduate school. So I would say that I'm certain that those schools substitute the GMAT and the other exams for the GRE when it's appropriate. So it would be a matter of going to the council or Senate or group that decides those things and introducing the topic and the idea of the substitution of the PA-CAT for the GRE. And that evidence can be found on the website to use when you go talk to those officials. So moving that approval process through your institution, then obviously we all know that there are a lot of people that speak for us that answer the phone. So making sure those people, the admissions recruiters, et cetera, are aware of the information would be important. And then Scott just showed a couple of website examples of how that could be reported on your website. Next slide. So how do you implement this? I can tell you that in our case, we have a pretty tight time frame for when we make admissions changes and then how we get that implemented. So next week, my institution, we will be meeting with the admissions committee to make any changes to our admission requirements for this upcoming cycle. And that has to go through a graduate council, a faculty senate, and the president's office. I walk all of that through over the next 3 to 4 weeks before we put this on our website. So you have to work through whatever cycle your institution requires, but certainly if a program decided to adopt this for the upcoming cycle, there's still time to make that change. And then you obviously need to notify applicants and communicate with them that it's a required exam and give them the information to go out there and take the exam. And the scores will then become available to the program within a few weeks of the student taking the exam. Next slide. Oh, we have an example of the score report. It's on the website. Scott's going to talk a little bit more about the score report in a minute and explain how the report comes out. So early February, the test will be available. For registration, we're utilizing Prometric, which have hundreds, if not thousands, of sites available. And then early May, the test will open. That's a continuous cycle, so a student can take the test anytime. What we do then is break that up into batches for score reports and then send those score reports out. Next slide.
So the reporting, there's been a lot of questions about how the reporting is derived. So it's reported in scale form, and just kind of backing up in terms of the psychometrics of the exam. We have a Roche specialist statistician who helped develop kind of the foundation of how this is scored. So it's based on scaled forms, very similarly to NCCPA, where you have a minimum of 200, a maximum of 800. And from there, it's going to be reported in percentiles. So as far as the reports, you've got two kinds of reports. One is the candidate score report that each person who takes the exam will receive. And then the official transcript, which goes to the program. So we'll show you an example of the score report. So you can see that what you have there is this candidate is you got the scaled score in the left column. So just for example, anatomy and physiology, a 414 scaled score equates to a 53% percentile ranking. So obviously 53% or 52% of the individuals scored lower than this individual. So you can see the percentile markings with that, and then the composite scaled score of 412. And there's an official transcript as well that goes out. And this is a transcript that the programs receive with the candidates that took the exam who designated to their program. And you can see that in some individuals, they might have taken the exam more than once. Again, that's probably going to be rare, but you can see that this is an individual who took the exam in November and then took it again. So that just kind of gives you a sense of what you're going to receive as far as a composite transcript report for your program, showing the same information as we just stated. Johnna?
So certainly we are sensitive to making sure that this exam is available to all applicants, and that includes applicants that might need accommodations. Prometric is an established testing center who has processes in place when the applicant applies to take the exam or registers to take the exam. They can request accommodations and work with Prometric to set that up. Additionally, we're sensitive to the concern about economically disadvantaged students and paying for this exam. So we are working on setting up a fee waiver, a reduction program for those students, and we will have information on the test website about how they can apply for that. Next slide. So we want to make sure that obviously resources are available for both the programs and the candidates. I think the website does a really good job of laying out what's available and information about the exam. There's digital information packets there and sample questions. I think that's one of the things that I've been asked for a lot is people want to see the test. And obviously we can't release the entire exam, but we certainly can provide examples of the questions. And the blueprint, of course, is important, what's on the exam, and the sample score transcript as we just showed. In terms of the candidate resources, there's a free practice exam, study guide, sample questions, and the score report, so they have an idea of what they're walking into and then how to interpret their score. Next slide. In terms of research opportunities that this produces, we all know that that's important for our careers, and just because we have inquiring minds. Over 37 programs helped us field test this. We'll be taking all of that information and publishing on it actually very soon in multiple publications. Certainly from that process, Scott and I have developed some ideas, practices, if you will, about what to do with this data, and we're happy to work with folks who are interested in that type of publication. But as individual programs, you may want to take this exam and look at the impact of it on your admission selections over time. You may want to take it and look at different subsets of students and how well one group does versus another. I know here we have some preferences for certain students that would result in those students having lower science or prerequisite GPAs, so I want to look at how they do on this exam. And then I'll talk a little bit about the pre-matriculation and how we're going to use that to help us matriculate those students, but help them be successful. So we can certainly, Scott and I are willing to help and connect you with some protocols and reports and how to take this information and make it publishable for yourself.
Thanks, Johnna. So in the research that we are in the process of publishing, and there is some research that will be published in April in the Internet Journal of Allied Health Practice. The first article that looks at PA-CAT and prerequisite variables is being published. We're in the process now of developing the manuscript to submit for first-year PACRAT and program academic GPA, which I'll show you some of the results of that here shortly. But here's some of the basic research that can be done by programs. And those of you that remember, kind of like organically, these, for example, the end of rotation exams, as well as PACRAT, programs over the years have published various articles, some single program articles, some multi-program articles. I published several articles on formative and summative exams, including PACRAT and then the rotation exams myself. So it's something that we foresee that programs will begin to evaluate the results of, for example, how PA-CAT can be impacted or impacts your admissions process over time. And this will then probably start appearing in the journal and at the forum and those kinds of things. So it's going to be a long process, but I think there's a lot of exciting possibilities. So then on to the next slide. Talking about the research findings, the first phase of the study, which was all IRB approved, I don't remember what the total count was at the very beginning, but the final count at the end of the first year, we had 408 examinees in this data that we're examining here that were administered the first 4 versions of the exam. And like I mentioned before, using the Roche model. And if you're not familiar with Roche model, I suggest that you look at it. It's the best way of looking at this type of exam development. So what did we find? The mean scaled score at 503, standard deviation of 21. Of the population that we looked at, the mean and standard deviation of the didactic GPA of the first year was 359 and 0.31. And then the mean PACRAT score was 128 with a standard deviation of 20. Now, let me talk about reliability for a second. So one thing to look at is that if somebody asks you a question, can PA-CAT, predict future performance? And the answer at this point is no, it can't predict future performance, but you can look at the reliability of an exam. So the internal reliability of this exam at 0.83 is about on course with what we would expect it to be. And that's determined by looking at the entire population, how they performed within individual questions, as well as the entire exam. So that's kind of one of the most important things. That means that the students, in terms of their inherent ability, would be measured very, very accurately. So what we found on the next slide was that when we field tested, so the findings show there was 37 programs, and we had more than 2,100 examinees, like I mentioned before. And I'll get in the next couple slides, I'll show you some actual data, but you can see here that this is kind of a busy slide, but let me kind of walk through it with you. So the PACRAT, the end of didactic year PACRAT, in terms of its correlation with didactic GPA, you can see it's a 0.46, which is significant with two-tailed. The scale score of the PA-CAT at didactic GPA was a 0.24, but with PACRAT was a 0.52. Then dividing the scale scores down with group 1, which is A and P, you can see it's 0.46 for PACRAT. For the second group, which is bio, micro, and genetics, a little bit less at 0.39, and then the chemistry a little bit less at 0.37. However, if you look at the undergraduate GPA and the undergraduate science GPA, a little bit surprising, but you can see that the undergraduate GPA had a weaker correlation for didactic at 0.14 and 0.19 for PACRAT. Then science had an inverse relationship with didactic GPA and then a weaker correlation with PACRAT. Excuse me. The next slide wanted to show you kind of like the relative value. So if you look at the value and the variance of explaining the ePACRAT results, the PA-CAT scale score had about a coefficient of 0.52, so it explained 27% of the variance of the PAC-RAT. Undergraduate GPA was 3.4%, science GPA was 1.2%, but if you put all these together, it did enhance it somewhat, up to 29.1. So we wanted to kind of show you how it compared, and so far it's promising. Okay, on to the next slide, please. Johnna?
So I want to talk a little bit about the pre-matriculation program. First, I'd say that I was thinking a little bit about that research, and we've discussed this before, but we know that students have such a variety in their undergraduate education. It's not surprising that their undergraduate GPAs weren't as highly correlated as a basic science exam that measured all of them on the same level, and that's exactly what we were trying to get at with this exam. In terms of the pre-matriculation program, this is maybe the thing that I'm most excited about this presentation today, because it's something that I had approached Exam Master about a few months ago, and I didn't know that they had already been planning on doing it, so I was super excited to hear it. And essentially, for any program that's requiring the PA-CAT this year, we'll be able to use the newly developed pre-matriculation program for PA students. And essentially what this is an online self-study for students that you've selected to start who maybe need to brush on their sciences. So at our program, we have a preference for certain life experience, such as military background. And oftentimes those students have a GPA that is a little bit lower, or they've had such scattered experience in their ability to take prerequisites due to deployments or other reasons that their basic science knowledge needs a little bit of brush up before they get to the program. So we look at this as a way to start remediation early, if you will, to get them at the level that they need to be successful. So I'll be using this to ID students based on their GPA and their PA-CAT scores, and this year we'll be asking them to participate and take the pre-matriculation, and then I'll do some research and compare that to my first cohort of students who also took the PA-CAT but didn't have the opportunity for the pre-matriculation, and just see how much of an effect and difference that it makes. And quite frankly, even some of our students who just finished undergraduate for whatever reason think that remembering where all the bones are is not necessary knowledge. And we tell them repeatedly, we're not teaching undergrad anatomy. This is not knowledge that you should come in with. So this may not be a bad idea for all of your students coming in, but definitely for those that may come in with a little bit lower basic science knowledge or scores. All right, next slide. I'll turn it over to Matt at this point.
Hi, this is Matt. Thanks, Scott and Johnna, for the good information. If you want to ask a question, and we found that the best way to do it is to submit a chat, and we already have one question up. I'm happy to answer that. The question from Debbie Winton at Barry University is, for the programs that require the PA-CAT, have you developed a minimum percent or scale score for admissions rubrics? And I'll take the first stab at that, and then maybe John and Scott might want to add something. The PA-CAT will have a minimum and a maximum scaled score just based on the statistics of it. However, the PA-CAT does not have a cut score or a passing score. It's really what we would call a norm referenced exam, not a criterion referenced exam. So, and because of that, really what we'll be looking at is how do your applicants, or how does any one individual applicant kind of stack up against their peers, in terms of just where they are. We will be providing not only the overall score, but those 3 domain scores, so you get some insight into where an applicant's strengths and weaknesses may be, and you'll have that comparative information so that you can at least see how they all stack up using the same instruments, and that was essentially our goal. So to answer that question, Scott or John, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think, excuse me, this is Scott. One thought that I know that we at CMU have looked at is just looking at percentile stratification. So if we're going to give X number of points for a PA-CAT, and again, I will emphasize that the number of points for PA-CAT is not going to be so high stakes that it's going to, make an enormous difference in the students being accepted or not accepted at that level. But looking at if they're top 25%, they might get 5 points. If they get between 50 and 75, they might get 3 points. So that hasn't been finalized yet. But some other people, some other directors I've spoken to are looking at kind of the same thing, looking at using a rubric to determine how many points they might use at the admissions level in terms of admitting students based upon percentages. And again, the ability to look at cut scores is years away. So that's I think will become organically one of the more common ways of looking at it.
Okay, good, great, Scott. Second question is, what would the cost of the pre-matriculation program be for students after the free period? Also, will it only be available for programs using the PA-CAT? All right, that's a good question. So initially, what we're thinking for this year for applicants who need extra help for studying and preparing for the PA-CAT, that the pre-matriculation will be available free for them. And for programs, who are involved with either recommending or requiring the PA-CAT, we're also thinking it will just simply be free for them as well. This is our first year with a PA pre-matriculation program, so it's not going to be as extensive as it will be next year in terms of the number of subjects that are covered. So really, we're going to be flexible this year with it. We want to get it out there, get feedback, have folks tell us if it's working for them or helping them. So really, it's a no-cost resource this year. Next year, a program who maybe is not involved in PA-CAT, if they want to use it, or even this year, if they're not involved in PA-CAT, then we might have a kind of a basic fee of like $2,500 for an introductory offer. So it's either going to be no cost for a lot of folks or low cost for those folks depending on the circumstances. Our initial focus will be on anatomy, physiology. We will also have microbiology. We will have critical thinking and time management. And again, this is not a sales pitch for the pre-matriculation, but we did want to mention it because it kind of dovetails well with the PA-CAT. So once you've admitted students and you have some insight into what their strengths or weaknesses are, you have something that hopefully you can kind of get them to tune up before they hit the didactic, since that's so hard really to catch up. And then we also thought it would be really helpful for the candidates, for those who may have not taken a prerequisite in a while. So we're really just trying to put it out there and get folks using it, and then next year we'll have a kind of more complete program. So I appreciate the question. Does anyone else have any questions related to this? Another question regarding the pilot programs. Do you need PAEA EOR exams for future analysis? And I think, Scott, maybe you can address that because you did mention that. I mean, researchers love data and love to correlate data in any way they can that might end up showing something meaningful. Scott, do you want to say something about that?
Yes, I think multi-program collaboration is going to be one of the key things. So if we have programs that are, launching and using PA-CAT and they're willing to, use this data, and again, it's going to require IRB approval if there's going to be any publishing involved with it, then yes, absolutely. Because I think having a multi-program study during the next couple of years would be a great way of generating scholarship. So I think the scholarship opportunities are there.
Okay, good. Any other questions? While folks may be mulling that over, I want to just touch base briefly on some of the conversations that we've been having with the pre-health advisors. The pre-health advising community is certainly aware of the PA-CAT. They're the folks, as you know, that are working with the students as they're coming out of undergraduate, trying to help them decide, do they want to pursue a career in medicine? Do they want to become a PA? Do they want to become a pharmacist? Some folks have expressed concerns that the exam might be too difficult. And what I wanted to just simply say about that is we really, our objective with the exam was to make it challenging so that it would properly differentiate the stronger from the weaker students. And that's part of what the Roche modeling does too. It really gets into looking at question difficulty, and it really helps in terms of having a good instrument that can really differentiate between the stronger and weaker students. But having said that, we really did make an effort to have the content be relevant to what introductory or intermediate type course would cover in those domains. So it should be challenging. The students who took it under the pilot circumstances found it challenging, but they also did not have the benefit of preparing for the exam. Most of them took the exam cold, whereas candidates will have the ability to brush up, including using some of the resources that we were making available. So I just kind of wanted to mention that was one thing that we'd heard from some of the pre-health advisors, concerns that maybe the exam's too difficult, and we wanted to just make a comment about that. Does anybody else have any questions? We will be making a link to this webinar available next week. We certainly appreciate everybody's involvement. If anybody has any feedback or wants to discuss the program, Jim or myself here at Exam Master are happy to have a call with you. Scott or Johnna would be happy to have a call with you. Scott or Johnna, do either of you have anything else you might want to add or any final thoughts?
I don't think so, not at this point. Just thank you everybody for taking time out of your Friday afternoon to learn more about the exam. Yep,
definitely. Johnna, anything at all?
Just say ditto to what Scott said. I really appreciate the attendance and the number of people that webbed in here.
Great. Thanks, Scott and Johnna, for your participation today, your help. We really appreciate that too. You guys are busy. All of you are busy. We know what it's like, and we certainly appreciate your time. Have a good day, everyone. Have a good weekend, and we're happy to have a chance to speak with you again real soon.